are going to take a look at the trial. And the bottom line is this, friends. We were expecting justice for Tyre Nichols. We were expecting justice for Tyre Nichols, a 29-year-old Black man in America that savagely and recklessly lost his life just going home. The man was simply just going home to his mama's house. And then we have to contrast that with 3 sworn officers, at that time members of the elite Scorpion unit, the crime fighting unit. Five men so savagely beat Tyre Nichols within an inch of his life. He lived for about 2 days following this savage beating. Then he died. Out of those 5 officers, 2 officers pled guilty, admitted their crimes, and served as witnesses for the state. So we have both a state case, that's the trial that concluded today, with the 3 not guilty. 3 not guilty verdicts. It is almost unbelievable. It is almost unbelievable. Well, I want to introduce you to our special guest. I've got for you a retired police officer. We're going to call him Dave to protect the privacy and the safety as an officer tonight, right? So let's hear from Dave. Dave is a retired police officer from a metropolitan city here in the U.S. with over 22 years of service to the community. Dave, you've heard the verdict. Over 27 charges amongst the 3 officers, Dave, and not a single one yielded a guilty verdict. It was a unanimous verdict of not guilty for all 3 of the charged officers. What say you, Dave?
Well, first, I would just like to truly send my deepest sympathy to the family. Unfortunately, they lost their son in this tragic event, and then they lost half of the battle with the court system with this not guilty verdict.
And I appreciate your sentiment, Dave. Thank you for joining Kendi K all day. And y'all, I must apologize if you hear that heaviness in my heart, but I don't know another way to be. This is not my America. When a man, I keep saying, what did he do wrong? Is being a Black man in America wrong? That this man simply went down the road. It appears that he was just trying to go home. He was just trying to go home. Y'all, welcome in. Thank you for choosing Kendi K all day. Y'all go ahead and hit that like button. Thank you for being here. Thank you for joining us. What went so wrong that night? The world will never know. The world will never know. But what we do know is that family has to be going through a lot tonight. I'm still trying to process. I was in a meeting earlier today when that verdict was reached and announced at 201 Poplar at the courthouse downtown Memphis, Tennessee. And when I looked at the TV and saw the words not guilty, I absolutely could not believe it. So, what has led us to this point? That's what I want to explore today. That's what I want to explore today. What has led us to a unanimous not guilty verdict? Now, the most egregious offense that these three officers were charged with was second degree murder. And we have retired police officer Dave with us tonight to provide us commentary as a retired sworn officer with over 22 years of experience. Dave, why did they have the charge of second degree murder versus the charge we often hear of first degree murder? Can you help shed some light on that, Dave?
First degree murder would not apply because first degree murder has to be premeditated, meaning you have to have a plan in place to kill another human being. Second degree murder would probably be more applicable in this situation, but it's still left up to the county attorney to file the appropriate charges. And based off the evidence that he or she may have received, a decision was made to go with second degree murder.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But the jurors also had the option of convicting these three officers with manslaughter. The officers' trial of all three rogue officers, and I'm going to just be honest with you, friends. I am quite biased because all I know is a tax-paying citizen was returning home for the evening at 8 o'clock at night. Y'all, it wasn't 2 a.m. You know, we know some nefarious things can happen at 2, 3, 1 o'clock in the morning. It was between 8 and 8:30 at night in January 2023, when Tyre Nichols was just trying to go home, just driving himself home. And he never made it home that night. He never made it home to eat that sesame chicken that his mama had prepared for dinner that day. Wow. Wow. These 5 officers in total were charged with second degree murder because of his untimely death. That may not have been the initial motive. It was not premeditated, but the man, in fact, did die. So we're left juxtaposing that with, how do we have this guy who is dead, 5 trained, sworn officers of the law, whose sole job was to protect and serve? We have, in 2023, we have cameras everywhere. Big Brother is watching us from everywhere. And we all saw it. The world has seen the video footage. How did the jury come back with a null verdict? Not guilty. Dave, our special guest, is joining us. Dave, what would you attribute the non-guilty verdicts to?
Well, I was informed that the jury was an all-white jury. And I think the issue is systemic. that these individuals were out of touch with reality and the value that they place on Black lives is clearly at a minimal. So to me, it appears that they saw no violation of law based solely on the fact that this young Black man, his life did not matter to them.
Dave, thank you. Dave, thank you again for joining us. And I waffled with having this stream this evening, but I wanted to say his name, Tyre Nichols. So if you're listening, drop into the chat, hashtag justice for Tyre Nichols. Justice for Tyre Nichols. Tyre Nichols was a father. Tyre Nichols was a tax-paying citizen in the city of Memphis, Tennessee. The man was simply going home. He has a child now who is fatherless. His mother's heart is broken. He has siblings wondering what happened? What on earth happened? And we've all seen the beating. We've all seen the torture that that human being went through at the hands of sworn officers. I'm still trying to just process what could have happened. What did happen on that fateful night? What happened? Right? What causes officers to go rogue? So let's just make sure that we all understand some basic facts. So this is the state's case where we have nine charges against each of those officers. So we have 27 charges that they could have been convicted of, found guilty of, and it was a unanimous verdict on all accounts. All three officers in the state trial were found to be not guilty on all charges. Clearly, if you saw the video from the courtroom, live from the courtroom, I think it was clear even to their attorneys for the defendants and to the defendants themselves. I think it was clear that they were shocked that they had not been convicted of not a single thing. Our retired guest on the platform tonight, joining me on the platform tonight, a retired police officer with over 22 years of experience. Officer Dave is with us, trying to help us make sense of this travesty. I just have to keep saying, y'all, this is not my America. This is not my America. I am ashamed that these officers got off with murder. It seems as if with the not guilty verdicts, because they didn't have to, first degree murder wasn't even on a part of this equation. Okay. With second degree murder were the charges, the most egregious charge that they have been charged with. Officer Dave has already shared the reason why first degree murder was not on the table, because I think everyone would agree that it was not premeditated from the start that they would kill this innocent man. It seems like his only crime was driving while Black. Officer Dave has also said, well, how did we get to a not guilty on all charges for the three officers on trial today? Officer Dave has just said, well, the jury the jury of their peers for 3 Black officers in West Tennessee, Shelby County, Memphis. The jury was all white. 8 white women and 4 white men. That's 12 white jurors who were deciding the fate of these 3 Black officers. Was that a jury of their peers? And why did we end up getting an all-white jury out of East Tennessee? Certainly, the city of Memphis is one of the Blackest or diverse cities in the state, and one of the most diverse cities in the country. Was somewhere between 65 and 68% of the residents in the state, in the city of Memphis, are Black, identify as Black African American. Was somewhere between 86 and 93% of the residents of Hamilton County, where they got the all-white jury from, are white. Wow. They had 16 jurors driven into Shelby County to act as jurors for this trial. And they said one of the jurors just simply went home, just did not show up for trial today for jury deliberations. I want to ask Officer Dave, is that a possibility that some type of objection or appeal process could be in order, since one of the jurors, there were not, as I understand, and y'all drop in that chat, let me know if you know something different. There were some jurors of color, but not Black. They said someone might have been biracial, but one juror that was supposed to be there, because, you know, they didn't select the alternates until they went, closing arguments concluded yesterday, and the jury started deliberating yesterday. They were to return this morning and finish deliberations and continue deliberating until they had a unanimous verdict. One of the jurors did not show up as scheduled. Is that problematic, Officer Dave? Is that problematic? What say you, Officer Dave?
It's possible that it could be problematic, but the alternate jurors, they have the ability to receive all the information that the other jurors receive, and jurors aren't exempt from family issues, personal issues. Things come up with everybody. So this particular juror that did not show up, it's not known at this point why. It is probably not proper to just assume why. It's probably best to just accept the fact that he or she didn't make it back in. And that's what the alternate jurors are for. That's the reason they're there. So the judge would have appointed whichever alternate juror that he believed would do the best job. If it's an juror and the victim in this particular case is a Black male, and they found no evidence of guilt for any of the officers involved, to me, it just seems completely contrary to the evidence that I saw.
Yes, I would agree. And that was going to be one of my next questions that I know people want to ask this retired police officer. Y'all, I want to thank you again, Officer Dave, for joining us tonight. for giving us commentary from a retired police officer's perspective, having served some 22 years, over 22 years as a police officer. You know the dangers. And I just have to ask myself, and I'm asking you, Officer Dave, and sure, Tyre Nichols was very tall, 6'2", 6'3" tall, so he was a tall man, but because of Crohn's disease, that's an inflammatory bowel disease. He had a very thin build. He was 6'2", 6'3" inches tall, but 6'2" or 6'3" tall, but he was just a very thin framed man. It seems to me inconceivable that it would take 5 officers to apprehend and put into custody one man. One man.
Just to be clear, the video that I saw, it didn't appear that these 5 officers were attempting to take this individual into custody. It appeared to me that they were on some type of power trip and were just trying to inflict as much pain, injury, and death to this young man.
Officer Dave, thank you. Thank you for your service, Officer Dave. Thank you for just telling the truth. Because that means you saw this in black and white, cut and dry, just like the world has seen it. So very cut and dry. I mean, 2 of the 5 officers involved in this murder, Tyre Nichols is dead. Y'all drop in the chat, if you don't mind, justice for Tyre Nichols. Drop that in the chat, if you don't mind. Let's show this family that we are in just as much shock as they are tonight. I bet you they are not sleeping tonight. Drop in the chat if you don't mind. Justice for Tyre Nichols. Y'all go ahead and hit that like button if you don't mind. This is Kendi K all day. And Kendi K is not okay tonight. Kendi K is mad as hell tonight because this was wrong. And I just, welcome in, Elevated. I just don't know what to say. This makes no sense. We've just heard our guest on the panel tonight is a retired police officer. And Officer Dave, do you mind sharing your race or ethnicity with us?
I'm a black male.
Officer Dave, I want to thank you for sharing that. Thank you for your transparency, Officer Dave. We have with us on the panel tonight a retired police officer with over 22 years of service to the community. Officer Dave said it's pretty clear to him that these officers were just on, this was the elite Scorpion unit, a unit that was quickly disbanded and dismantled following this horrific murder. Immediately following this horrific murder, Police Chief C.J. Davis, first Black female police chief of Memphis, immediately disbanded that strategic unit, crime fighting unit, because apparently that is what their MO was, to terrorize tax-paying citizens. to terrorize tax-paying citizens. Y'all, my heart is heavy tonight. My heart hurts for Tyre Nichols' mother and stepfather and for his siblings tonight. Y'all, I think it comes down to this. I tend to agree with something that our guest on the panel tonight, Officer Dave, said. That jury coming out of Hamilton County on the opposite side of Tennessee, Hamilton County, Chattanooga, if you're familiar with that city. Chattanooga is the largest city in Hamilton County, Tennessee. And it's mighty white over there. Mighty white. All the jurors that handed down a unanimous not guilty verdict for all three officers of all charges. It didn't have to be second degree murder. It could have been manslaughter, right? They didn't even get convicted of coercion. Like, we know that 11 images of Tyre Nichols' brutal beating and what his body looked like were sent by one officer's cell phone. And then they took off. They removed their body cameras. They removed their body cameras and or turned them off. Wow. Now, a lot of people, when we were looking at the closing arguments from the defense, so each of the three officers had their own attorneys. And so each one of them had to give their closing arguments. And I will tell you, I was sure that we were going to get at least some convictions on some of the charges. But when that last lawyer got up for, I believe it was Officer Smith, the last attorney on the defense side, they gave his closing argument for, I believe the officer was Smith. Y'all, if you listened to his racist, biased words, and a lot of people were upset with his closing argument, but really, he did what he was supposed to do for his client. He was appealing to the sensibilities of that all-white jury, 8 white women and 4 white men that sat before him. He walked them through every single moment of the video footage from the perspective of whiteness. And clearly that is the only perspective that they heard that made sense to them. Whereas as a Black woman in America, I can only embody my Black body. I can only speak of my experiences as a Black woman in America. Quite frankly, y'all, I have had too many experiences, all negative, with the police as a Black woman with a college degree. Why am I a Black woman? Simply for being a Black woman. Not only have I been pulled over by the police, I've been pulled out of my car, where I was asked to step out of my car and step to the back of my vehicle. That has happened to me. How can one Black woman be a threat? You're the one with the gun, officer. Wow, y'all. I'm just trying to make sense. And so, again, thank you to Officer Dave for joining us. Officer Dave is a retired police officer with over 22 years of experience. Officer Dave, what do you have any other insight? I have the video here queued up to play, but y'all, we've all seen the video. I don't want to put us through that. We've all seen the video. Y'all drop in the chat if you don't mind. Justice for Tyre Nichols. Let's show this family that we do not agree with this travesty of justice. So, in fact, the officers were found not guilty on these state charges, but all five officers were convicted, already convicted of federal civil rights crimes. And they are all awaiting their sentences, and those sentences were pending the outcome of their state trial. We know that two of the officers pled guilty to their state crimes that they were the state crimes that they were up against, and they decided to become witnesses for the state in the state jury trial that has just ended with not guilty verdicts for the remaining three officers. So we do expect that all of these five officers will at least serve federal time, but the three officers that did not plead guilty to the state crimes were found not guilty. How can you be convicted? So, federal civil rights violations and also conspiracy at the federal level, but then to be found not guilty. I think it comes down to this, y'all. These jurors were white. They had been in Memphis over a week. And in my mind, they just took the easy way out, because do Black lives really matter? I'm gonna step back for a second because I'm kind of without words. Officer Dave, any thoughts at this moment?
Well, first, I would like to say that the criminal element is different throughout the country. Each city has its own separate and distinct individual problems that the police departments are attempting to address, and formulating special units to address those specific needs of their particular communities is a very common practice. Where it goes wrong is when those specialty units lack accountability, lack supervision, and are placed in a position where those individuals think that they are the jury, the law enforcement officer, and in this case, the executioner.
Oh,
So
I felt that. I felt that, and I feel that they executed
and
literally
it's a
yards from his mother's house, from his mother's front door. He was calling out for his mama. I'm sorry, Officer Dave. Go ahead.
And so I completely agree with police departments nationwide making the best efforts to deal with the particular crimes in their communities. But where the issue falls down is that certain units don't have accountability, lack supervision, and officers are put in positions where they're expected to bring down a crime rate to make a chief or deputy chief or a mayor look good. And so they have to increase their production. And sometimes that line gets crossed where they're doing good law enforcement work practices and turned into we're going to treat certain individuals poorly. We're going to ignore their civil rights, violate their rights, just to put stats on paper to make somebody in a high position look good.
Wow. Wow. I remember when I learned of this murder. A retired Black police officer, Officer Dave, that has joined us on the panel tonight, ascribed the word execution to what the world witnessed on video. We have the video, the videos, right? Do y'all remember the preparation that the city of Memphis and Shelby County, the painstaking plans they went through with riot units on standby? They closed schools half a day so that they could get the city's children home and into safe spaces, because y'all, they literally thought the city would burn once the video footage was released. The world saw the footage. Yet it's that blue line of silence. It's that blue line of silence again, where seemingly these officers, Black men themselves, were not convicted of a single crime at the state level. Wow. Wow. I wanted to support this family tonight. I want to discuss what we, y'all, this is a sin and a shame. This is just a sin and a shame. This is a sin and a shame. A sin and a shame. District Attorney for the city of for Shelby County, Tennessee, Steve Mulroy, looked in shock, as did most folks. Ben Crump has been in the city for the past 2 or 3 days in anticipation of the verdict. The Nichols family is back in the city. They attended the trial. They expressed, as I'm told, no emotion when the verdict was read. Why is it that people of color can't seem to get justice in America? Why is it? Officer Dave, do you have anything to share with us?
Well, throughout my police career, and I worked in primarily an all Black community my entire career. It's unfortunate that the have-nots typically receive the worst treatment by the department, because the have-nots typically don't complain on officers. And if they do complain, their complaints typically fall on deaf ears. So the problem is bigger than just these 5 officers, because you don't need like a whole army of super cops to make a difference. You only need one, because out of that group of 5, any one of those officers could have stepped up and said, hey, we're going to place this guy in handcuffs. We're going to take this guy to jail. We're not going to beat this guy. We're not going to take photos after we beat this guy. We're not going to kill this guy. Any one of those officers could have stopped all of that action, but none of them chose to. And to me, that seems that was just the standard, that they ganged up on people, brutalized people, took photos,
to send to their friends, to their families, to somehow show this is what we've done and we're proud of it.
Mm-hmm. They were
So
proud
in a
of it.
situation,
Sorry about that.
when you take photos, just look at it like people that go out and shoot elephants. The first thing you want to do is take a photo of a dead elephant that they shot with a rifle, as if to say, I'm big, I'm proud, look what I've done. There's no other reason to take a photo of somebody you just brutalized and send it to a friend, send it to a girlfriend. There's no other reason other than just, here's my trophy. So,
Go ahead, Officer Dave.
so I was going to say that typically individuals in minority communities receive a harsher treatment because officers that work in those communities, and in this case, it's I'm still puzzled how these officers were black officers.
That's shocking.
I'm still puzzled.
It's shocking.
I'm still puzzled how black officers who they said where they were from that community, knew people in that community, would brutalize the people that are in that community. That's still just blowing my mind.
Yeah. And I will tell you, the area of town where known as East Memphis, it in its heyday, it was some of the first suburban areas in the city. It's where the rich folk moved and bought their first homes. And so we're not talking about a part of the city where, folks didn't cut their lawns and things like that. I'm saying, folks worked at FedEx and made a decent living. Memphis is known for the grit and grind, right? We've had the Memphis Grizzlies, an NBA team, but they call the FedEx Forum where the Grizzlies play, they call it the grind house, right? Because folk, just hard working, working class people, right? AutoZone, headquartered in Memphis. FedEx maintains corporate entities right here in Memphis. FedEx was birthed in Memphis. Why did Tyre Nichols not get justice today? Why did this family not get justice? So what remains, y'all? What remains are the sentencing hearings for the federal crimes. All 5 officers that murdered Tyre Nichols. All officers were previously convicted on federal civil rights and conspiracy. They have those convictions and they are pending their sentencing. Sentencing was halted to allow the state trials to go forward. So they had both federal trials and state trials. And what concluded today was the state trials for the 3 officers who pled not guilty. They were found not guilty, who pled not guilty, and they were found not guilty by an all-white jury of 8 white women and 4 white men. What happened to a jury of your peers? What happened to, and I'm going to pose this question to Officer Dave. We have with us, and I want to thank you again, Officer Dave, because it's getting late into the evening, y'all. It's getting late into the evening. But I'm just asking y'all to stay with us because Tyre Nichols is dead. So I think we owe it to the memory of this American citizen just like us to try to talk about this, talk our way through this a little bit. Did not these officers have the duty to intervene when you saw your fellow officers going rogue, acting with a criminal mind and with criminal intent? When you see them savagely beating Tyre Nichols in the head so bad that you separated the man's brain from his skull, did not Officer Dave, did not those officers have a duty to intervene? And why
Yes.
didn't they?
And that's what I was saying that earlier, that any one of those officers could have intervened and stopped this entire situation. But the culture of their specialty unit wouldn't allow it. And so, based off what I saw, this was a collaborative effort to do what they have always done, is victimize the innocent,
Mm.
victimize individuals who weren't in a position to truly fight back. And so, with lack of supervision, with lack of accountability, units like this typically terrorize and brutalize minority communities across the US. There has to be appropriate supervision, there has to be appropriate accountability in order for situations like this to not occur. And it's clear to me, based off the fact that one or two of those officers, after this incident was over, the first thing they did was take photographs and send it to their friends, to their girlfriends, to relatives, to other officers. It was clear that this was more of a trophy situation versus them trying to make a valid arrest for a crime that was committed.
Yeah. Clear to me, clear to everybody, right? We have a officer that now when I listen to Officer Dave's commentary, and thank you again, Officer Dave, for joining us late into the evening tonight to provide commentary on the travesty of justice. That's what I'm calling it. I'm calling it a travesty of justice in America tonight, where those three murderers walk away with not guilty verdicts on all the charges. And I think for no other reason than the all white jury, and we'll never know because the jury does not have to share how they came to their conclusions. In my mind, for no other reason than let's just say not guilty and let's just go on home. We can't come to an agreement on any of the other charges. So let's just go not guilty with everything and let's just go home. I don't know, y'all. I just don't know. I just don't know. How can this be okay? And Officer Davis hit on a good point that this is not just isolated to Memphis. Okay. This type of scenario is being replicated all around the country. Y'all, George Floyd murdered in the street in Minneapolis, suburb. Tyre Nichols murdered in the street by police officers themselves. Something's not right. Something is rotten in the buttermilk. Something is rotten in the buttermilk. Y'all, I thank you for rocking and riding with me. This is Kendi K. All day. And today is a sad day in America. I just don't know anyone that can honestly be honest with themselves. So one thing is for sure, those 3 officers have escaped convictions in their state trials with not guilty verdicts. But how you close your eyes at night and not see the face of Tyre Nichols, may your spirit never rest in peace. And I'm speaking to Tadarius Bean, Demetrius Haley, and Justin Smith. May your spirit always be vexed for taking an innocent man's life. And for what? Elevated, thank you for being courageous and dropping into the chat. Elevated Mindset is offering a possible point of view that perhaps the jury was thinking this. Well, the officers are already convicted in the federal crimes, so what difference does this make now? What I think about knowing that these officers still have federal convictions, it makes me think, yeah, so they're going to spend some time in jail. But if you know anything about state-run prisons and federal prisons, notice that the 2 officers that pled guilty prior to the state trials, and they also pled guilty during the federal trials, they changed their pleas during the federal trials and changed them to guilty pleas, and then agreed to serve as witnesses from that point moving forward in the federal and state trials. But part of their plea agreements, their signed plea agreements, was that any time that they're given, those 2 officers that did plead guilty for their parts in the murder and execution of Tyre Nichols, they're going to get to serve that time in federal prisons. Federal prison camps are kind of just camps. Yeah, you're locked up, but yeah, it's kind of like very nice in comparison to state-run prisons. Extremely nice. So that these officers are going to get, yeah, they're going to get some federal time because the federal trials have already concluded and they were convicted on civil rights violation charges and charges of conspiracy because they conspired to try to cover up what they had done. But you can't cover up murder. We have a dead man. The blood of Tyre Nichols is on your hands and on the ground. Who am I talking to? Darius Bean, Demetrius Haley, and Justin Smith. May God have mercy on your souls. Wow. Wow. Y'all, I'm just torn. My heart is heavy tonight. My heart is heavy tonight. Y'all, thank you for hitting that like button. Thank you for the hearts. And this is just a travesty. This is just a travesty. We're almost to the top of the hour. Y'all stick with me to the top of the hour. And if anybody has any thoughts, y'all go ahead and drop those in the chat right now. And if nothing else, let's go ahead and run that hashtag up. Hashtag justice for Tyre Nichols. Hashtag justice for Tyre Nichols. Lord, help us all. Lord, help us all. One thing is for sure, Tyre Nichols is in a better place than this foolish, foolish world we're living in right now. My God, help us. Help us. I don't, it's not even just the 3 officers that have to live with the death of Tyre Nichols and knowing that their parts, that all 5 officers played in that and contributing to his death. But now, may God have mercy on the souls, and may your spirit never be at rest to that jury. I'm so sorry to that jury. If there's anybody in the chat, I want to kind of maybe we'll just spend the last few minutes talking about what it's like to be a juror. As a registered voter, I have served as a juror on both state and local juries and also on one federal jury, because that is how they choose the jurors. That's how you get into a jury pool of possible jurors, is that you participate in your local and federal elections, and they pull from those pools randomly. And so I've served on both a state jury pool and also a federal jury pool. And it's a very, trying to do my civic duty. And it makes me think also about group relationships. Y'all, we've got about 4 minutes. Stick with us for about 4 more minutes and we're going to wind this thing down. I thank y'all for sticking with me. Justice for Tyre Nichols. Say his name. Say his name. Tyre Nichols. To the family, y'all stay strong. The city of Memphis has been sued for millions of dollars in a wrongful death suit. The family has sued the city of Memphis and Shelby County for the wrongful death of Tyre Nichols. Now that process, there's still a long ways to go on that, but I do hope that they can get a measure of justice then. But is there a dollar amount that you can put on a human life? Not in my mind. Not in my mind. But I think about the group dynamics that might be in place for a jury, because somebody had to be thinking, this is wrong. This is wrong. But yet nobody intervened and said aloud, this is wrong. And we will never know, because that's something that I remember from being a part of juries before, that the judge will tell you that you don't ever have to disclose who you are as a juror, what your real name is. They go by juror numbers. They just refer to you as a number. And it's up to you to share more about the process that you and the other jurors used to come to your verdicts, unless you want to. It is your right into perpetuity to disclose or not to disclose. But then I also think about the group dynamics of this, quote, Scorpion unit, who was literally a rogue gang of police officers who had gone off the deep end. Why did nobody speak up? Why was it okay for everyone to remain silent when they knew what they were witnessing was wrong? I'm going to give our guest, I want to thank our guest a retired police officer with over 22 years of service. And y'all, representation matters. Officer Dave is a retired police officer and a Black African American identifying police officer with over 22 years of service to the badge. Officer Dave, I'm going to give you the last words on this matter as we come down from this place.
What I would encourage everyone to do across the country is that if you see police misconduct, don't be afraid to report it. Don't be afraid to make the news aware. This culture of the blue wall has to end, because the people that typically suffer behind the blue wall are minorities.
Mm-hmm. And I would probably add that to those with the least amount of resources, the poor. What would you say to that, Officer Dave?
I would absolutely agree. You don't have to have a PhD. You don't have to have a bachelor's degree to see something that is right and something that is wrong. If one person steps up and reports police misconduct, that one person can be the person that makes a difference in the next encounter that that officer has with another individual.
Yeah. If you see something, say something. If you see something, and say something. If you see something is not right, say something. I want to applaud the doctor. That's something that came up in the trial. The caring, compassionate, white doctor that knew Tyre Nichols was not going to make it and contacted Tyre Nichols' mother and said, "Your son is in bad shape. Come now." I applaud that doctor for being courageous enough to know that they were trying to cover up the incident, the murder.